Hi, Sharon.
That was weird. It's like I couldn't figure out my technology.
Is it not working for you?
Yeah, now it's working fine. How are you?
Good. How are you?
Good.
I feel like I haven't seen you since,
I know, it's forever.
whenever that was.
Yeah.
Well, I'm happy to share your slide deck if you want, or like if that's easier for you, or you are a co-host, so you should have screen sharing ability if you prefer to just do that on your own.
Okay. Let me drive. So it's what, 15 minutes up to?
We're flexible. I think probably just aiming for 15 minutes
Okay.
is probably good, so that there's plenty of time for questions. And I'm just kind of hoping that students will be engaged and can just have some open discussion.
Yeah, it ebbs and flows. So at least we've gotten to 10 people, which is more than I thought we would get.
Yeah, no, I think this is definitely a topic of interest. It's just one of those that I just never really know how many of whoever signed up are actually going to be here. But we had 30 people that signed up to attend. So if we
yeah, the enrollment in classes have been much, much lower in the finance than we anticipated. So I was just like, oh, maybe we should do something extra. But yeah, it looks like we have some traction there. If you can share out the report to folks who you think will be interested, or to the entire MPA class, especially the graduating class, that would be great. I know I shared it with the first year, so the first years have already seen it.
Yeah, no, I could definitely do that. And then I've also got it, I have it saved so that I can drop it as a link today just in the chat so people can look at it too.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Well, I can go ahead and start letting people in, and then I'll start recording this if that's okay. And I can kick things off with an acknowledgement and just introduction, and then I'll turn it over to you.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Hello and welcome as everybody is getting into the Zoom room and everyone's audio is connecting. We will just give it another minute or so as people continue to come into this space, and then we will kick things off. In the meantime, while we're waiting, I'd love to just see if you want to drop in the chat, where are you joining us from? I know that some of you may be in Parrington Hall or on campus. Some of you may be joining from home. Awesome. We got Parrington, Tea Republic. Great. Home. This is also just my informal way of just kind of trying to survey, as well as we keep moving forward with career programs throughout the year, and trying to assess like what's going to be the best way for us to do these things, because definitely navigating strange circumstances this year and this quarter. All right, well, it looks like we've got a pretty good group in here. So I am going to start recording this session, and then we'll kick off with a brief introduction and acknowledgement before passing things off to Sharon Kioko. All right, so welcome everyone. I am Shannon Merchant, Director of Career Development here at the Evans School of Public Policy and Governance. We are really excited to offer this session today with Evans faculty member Sharon Kioko, just to have this space to understand public finance careers and lean on Sharon's expertise to share some of that perspective. So before we dive into the program, it is a practice at the Evans School, and we try to do this with all of our career events to offer a brief land and labor acknowledgement before we dive into the content. We do this because as we think about career pathways and jobs that you may find yourselves doing, we want to make sure that we are continuing to encourage this practice of self-reflection and really considering how you can be thinking about your job and your career pathway as an opportunity to be creating change, particularly as we know that there are systems of racism that exist in government and policy and places of work and employment. That being said, I do want to acknowledge I am joining here from the University of Washington campus, which is located on the ancestral lands of the Duwamish people and the Coast Salish peoples, including the lands which are touching the shared waters of all tribes and bands within the Duwamish, Suquamish, Puyallup, Tulalip, and Muckleshoot nations. Today, we're going to be talking about public finance careers. We know that money has power. Money is power. And so as we are all thinking about the ways that we can use our careers and use our own power and positionality to create change and make lasting impact, we hope that through this session, you continue to think about and reflect how a role in finance and budgeting can be used to dismantle systems of racism and discrimination that continue to exist. Thank you for allowing us to have that introduction. And now I am going to go ahead and turn things over to Sharon, who is going to begin with a presentation, a slide deck providing just kind of an overview, a starting point for us to be talking about and learning about public finance careers.
Thank you, Shannon, for that welcome. And welcome, everybody. You're either in my class at this quarter or you were in one of my classes in the last academic year. Let me briefly, it's not going to be a long slide deck, so I don't plan to present the entire time that we have today, but I just wanted to have something to share with you that gives you sort of an outline of public finance careers, what you can think about, and what Shannon is also going to add to the chat is going to be a slide deck, a report from the National Association of State Treasurers, which did a survey of public finance jobs in the last few years, just to show what the existing positions are, what are the trajectories to leadership positions, and then what is the expected demand. So I'll talk about that in a little bit. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to interject. Just use either the raise hand function and you'll show up earlier on in the at least in the, I think, 20 squares that I have on my screen. So just to give you a sense of what public finance careers would be in, there are several places where you can think about jobs in this space. A vast majority are going to be in budget management. Now, budget management, essentially, that's what we covered in 522. If you are in Dwight Dively's class this year, or this quarter, you're also covering a lot of budget management in that class as well. That is essentially managing the budgets, right? All the way from creating the budget, getting the budget approved, executing the budget, and then managing that budget throughout the budget period. And in some extent, reporting at the end of the year, how those resources were used, whether you were able to achieve the goals that the organization or the unit had. There are different places where this happens. So I always tell folks, you can think of the central budget office as one place that is under the executive. So there's a central budget office for the governor. There's a central budget office for a city, which is under the mayor. There's a central budget office for the county, which is under the county commissioner, right? So you have the central budget office. For the president, if you're interested, the Office of Management and Budget, known as OMB, is a central budget office, right? So we think of those as the executive budget office. You also have agency budget offices. So each agency has a budget team. For example, we have one which is led by Jen McEwen. That is our budget office. Each unit in the university has its own budget office. Those tend to be much smaller and they are focused on that particular unit, whereas a central budget office is often focused on the entirety of that entity. So the governor's budget office is looking at the entirety of the state of Washington spending. The city budget office is looking at the entirety of the city spending. Then you also have what we call legislative budget offices, which are essentially supporting legislators through the budget approval process. So these tend to have very cyclical cyclical workloads. So when the legislature is in session or when the council is in session and has to approve a budget for the next year, that's when you have very long work days. So they can be 12-hour days, including sometimes weekends, to get the budgets approved before the start of the year. But there you're supporting the legislative body. So if you're talking about the House and the Senate down in a limb here, you're essentially appointed in the Office of Personnel Research, or OPR. If you're thinking at the federal government level, we're thinking about the Congressional Budget Office. If you're thinking about the city council, there's also a legislative budget office that supports the city council as well. But in that place, again, you're managing the budget or getting the budget through the approval process. Now, remember, the legislative body has the power of the purse. So what you're doing there is essentially having conversations with each agency or each department to see what they've put in the budget, whether it aligns with the legislative agenda, and then also making sure that changes that the legislators want to see are reflected into the agency budgets before they are approved, okay? Now, we really don't talk about banking and cash management in any of our classes, but this is also an essential part of managing financial resources. This is what we call treasury management. You'll also see it, Office of the Comptroller sometimes. Here you're managing relationships with banks. You're making sure all your cash flows are coming in. They're coming in on time. So you're dealing with revenue collections, property tax, sales tax, etc. And then you're making sure payments are going out on time. You're doing a lot of these transactions electronically. This will be, again, making sure payroll is done. Hourly pay is also made. You're making sure all the contracts are paid. You're also managing liquidity. So here you're making sure there's enough money in the bank account to meet payroll and all other expenses. And if you don't have enough liquidity, you should have a cash flow forecast to essentially determine when you need to either dip into investments or have a line of credit to manage that. For those of you who are in my debt management class, you know a lot of what is happening here, and debt management is really responsible for issuing debt to finance infrastructure. So this could be anything from schools to your parks, roads, public buildings, bridges, etc. Of the three that I've talked about, debt management, I would say, is much, much smaller. We usually see maybe 1 or 2 positions come up every 2 or 3 years at the city, county, and at the state level. The teams tend to be very, very small. And folks who end up in debt management positions don't usually transition out of debt management position, given the unique skill sets that you have to go in, and then just the unique activities that you are engaged in that space. Then there are other places where you can get finance positions, right? So if you're dealing with endowments, right, there are a few entities that have endowments, University of Washington being one. That's where you're dealing with a lot of investments as well as pensions. So if you're interested, State of Washington has 3 pension plans. Those are centrally managed by the State of Washington. Again, because of the unique skill set that is required here, few positions end up coming up in investments or pensions. Then the last part is legislative, and that is the one which I previously mentioned under budget management, essentially supporting the legislative body, getting the budgets approved, changes in legislative law, knowing how the law changes the budgets, and so on. Okay. Now, there are a couple of quick highlights I wanted to share with you. I believe I shared this with a few of my MPA students in 522 last fall. One, this is a really, really good time to be looking for a job in any profession, but it's a really, really good time to be looking for a job in public finance. This is a chart that's included in the report that Shannon has just shared with you. And it's showing you the average age in public finance, which is in blue, compared to the US workforce, which is in yellow. And you can see about 31% of the workforce is 55 years and older, which means these are folks who are going to be retiring anywhere between the next 5 years and the next 10 years. Then you have another 29% who are 45 to 54, which also will be either transitioning to leadership position, which might be non-finance positions, but also transitioning into retirement, because there's some folks who retire early at 55. So they're going to be essentially what we've called the gray tsunami that is going to hit the public sector. And that one is really worse, particularly in public finance, because we are not recruiting enough. And you can see the 16 to 24-year-old group, there's very few folks from undergrad who are taking on public finance positions, even though there are a lot of positions that are available in that require only a bachelor's of arts degree. And then you can see even the recruitment 25 to 35, that still lags behind the US workforce at 16%. So keep this in mind, and I'll give you a couple of pointers here when you look at some of the jobs I have also included here. The other thing the report highlights is the experience requirements, and they are looking at job postings in 2019 and 2020, 2020 being the COVID year. And you can see for a vast majority of finance roles in the public finance, in public sector, which is going to be the first pie chart, the one to your left, you can see 48% require 0 to 2 years of experience compared to 29% as an industry benchmark. And then 3 to 5 years, that's about 36%. So you really don't need a lot of experience. Even if it looks like the ad requires a lot of experience, just keep in mind, there is very little supply at this point and a whole lot of demand. And I'll give you a couple of examples there as well. Then in the last couple of slides, I just wanted to give you a sense, and again, this is included in the report. One, a lot of the finance jobs, we expect to see growth in that space, right? We expect to see an increasing number of public finance or financial management, budget analyst positions coming up. But the other thing to remind folks is these are the jobs that really don't get cut first. They get they are cut last. So you really have to be in a deep recession to essentially cut your finance team. You tend to cut your program teams first rather than cut your finance team. So there's a lot of stability and a lot of growth in finance jobs compared to other jobs in the public sector. I've also shown you there's a lot of opportunity here because of expected retirements and general attrition. I wouldn't necessarily say there's a lot of burnout in finance in the public sector compared to the burnout that exists in the private sector. There's a lot of flexibility in the jobs, predictability. Even if you're working for the legislative body, so I have a former student who works down in Olympia for OPR. And yes, when you are in session, it can be really intense 12-hour days, but that happens for about a month. And then you have greater flexibility, even including remote work at this point for the remainder of the calendar year. So just keep in mind for most folks who are younger, who are planning to start a family, public sector jobs are really, really attractive in terms of just managing the work-life balance. Stability, these jobs are less likely to be impacted by a recession, and folks tend to stick to public finance jobs once they get started compared to private sector jobs. And then the last one, which I'll talk about now, is lower barrier to entry. And I want to give you a few examples of some of the jobs that are out there. But I want you to keep in mind a couple of things. First, when you look at some of the job ads that you're seeing there, you may say to yourself, I do not have the right experience. I do not have, I don't have the 5 years of experience they're asking for. I do not have familiarity with all the software they've included in that space. But just keep in mind a couple of things. One, as I mentioned earlier, there are very few folks who are applying for some of these positions. So supply is very low and demand for positions is, the number of positions being advertised is very high. So you have the actual advantage in the space. Two, remember employers are always giving out what their wish list is, right? So they're going to always say, I am looking for this extraordinary, what we usually call the unicorn type of candidate. We know unicorns don't exist except in fairy tales, right? They're always asking for a person who has 5+ years of experience, who has experience within that particular agency or within that particular government and is familiar with the internal processes. That is really, really ambitious. Very rarely are you able to get anybody who has a mix of all those things. Yes, you may be competing with internal candidates, but even if the position looks as though it is one that you are not qualified for, I still encourage you to apply, because if they promote internally, then you could get the junior position in that role. The other thing I will mention, let me stop sharing there for a moment. The other thing I will mention is keep in mind that for some folks, if they don't find the right person, but they are still looking at that position, they may hire you at a lower rank, right? So if you are looking for a budget analyst 5, and you applied for the budget analyst 5, but you don't have the qualifications and experience at budget analyst 5, they may hire you at budget analyst 4 and budget analyst 3. And once you get through the first year, you get through probation, and they're happy with your progress, then you can be promoted through back to budget analyst 5. So for a lot of students, at least I've had 4 or 5 students in the last 2 years apply for positions I did not think were entry-level positions. I actually remember having a conversation with somebody and I said, this is not an entry-level position. Are you sure they are looking for somebody straight out of the MPA program? And they said, well, they've had a hard time recruiting, and they are open to finding somebody who is willing to learn, is interested in, this was a debt management position, and another one was a senior financial analyst with the Housing Commission, and they were willing to train that person up, right? So they were really interested in the individual, the interest, the skill set, and then anything internal, all the internal processes, then they'll just train that person or train up that individual such that they are able to get what they are looking for and able to train up that individual rather than trying to keep recruiting. Because if you have a vacant position for a very long time, it doesn't mean you'll be more successful hiring the longer you have that position open. So a lot of folks are really amenable to just being able to say, hey, I'm looking for to hire folks in, even if they don't have the right qualifications and experience. So in that last slide, which Shannon has also shared, you'll see some positions, and a lot of the positions I put a link to are positions that were either posted in December of last year or January or February this year. A lot of them are February of this year as well. I will say, if you haven't thought about this, UW is a great employer. Particularly the School of Medicine tends to hire a lot of financial analysts and budget analysts. The School of Medicine, it makes up 50% of the university as you think about it. If you think about UW, 50% is medicine and then the 50% is the university. So there are a lot of opportunities available at the University of Washington. And they are really good positions and really good employer provided benefits. Then I've given you different positions down in Olympia as well as here in Seattle. There are a couple of comments I will make. There have been a few positions that I've seen that are 100% remote. So there are opportunities for you to get a job that doesn't require to be physically in the office. City of Seattle, for example, I know is scaling back on the amount of physical space that it is occupying in downtown Seattle and moving some of its staff to remote working. But then if you need to meet as teams, then you'd meet in downtown Seattle. So just keep in mind the going back to office model is likely to change going forward as well. So it gives you a lot of flexibility. The jobs down in Olympia as well, if you still want to live in Seattle, I would also say are going to be more or less a flexible work environment unless you have a meeting that you need to be physically present. But I know a lot of the folks down in Olympia are hosting a lot of their meetings remotely even now and likely going to continue to do so going forward. So just keep in mind, COVID has really changed how we are going to be working, which allows us to live where we want to live, but also work in places that are matching our needs. Okay. So I'll end my comments there now and open it up for questions.
Yes, and so for the rest of our time, this is meant to be just discussion, conversation. Sharon obviously has a lot of knowledge and insight and expertise, and so we're really excited to have her share it. If we don't get a lot of questions, I have a list of questions that are things I commonly hear from students, and I'm happy to jump in. But please feel free, if you have a question that you'd like to ask, you can raise your hand, unmute yourself and ask it. Or if you're not in a space where you can do that, feel free to drop it in the chat.
Mm-hmm. Hey, Graham.
Hello, Professor Kioko. Thanks for your presentation. Speaking as someone who's in the midst of trying to actually craft a resume, what are the sort of skills that employers, public financial management are looking for in new employees?
I'll definitely let Shannon chime in on that one. I know how to do an academic resume very well. I may not necessarily know how to do a professional resume. A couple of things come to mind. They do want you to be able to do more than basic Excel, right? So developing your Excel spreadsheet skills is really, really important. The other thing I will say is that a lot of employers are looking to folks who can use Tableau, Microsoft BI, who can manage large data sets using Microsoft Access. But I think data management and information management is going to be really, really important. Now, if you are likely to be in a role that is outward facing, you need to also think about your presentation skills. So if you're going to be in a legislative position, which is going to be presenting and connecting to legislators, then you really need to be articulate, need to have a very diplomatic way of presenting information, being able to provide write reports very quickly, right? Especially legislative, since you're in session, you need to write up a report probably within a day, if not within a few hours, so that it can go into consideration during the session. So writing is really important, presentation is really important, and then Excel managing data. Now, they will tell you, hey, this position is looking for somebody who can manage project management software or ArcGIS, or they'll talk about PeopleSoft or Workday. I wouldn't worry about those internal management softwares. A lot of those are going to be unique to each organization, but there are skills that are going to be irrespective of sector, and definitely data management, presentation, writing are going to be at least at the top of my list. Shannon, do you want to add on to that?
Yeah, I completely agree with everything that you've just said. I will really emphasize particularly what you were saying about presentation skills, writing and communication skills. These are the things that, when I'm talking to city council members and managers, these are some of the main things that they're saying, we need this, we need somebody who can come in and create a great slide deck, which doesn't seem like it should be that difficult to do, but because you're having to do so much communication of these concepts, it is really essential. In terms of hard skills, technical skills, most typically I am seeing the requirements around Excel. I see a variety of data visualization software. Usually they're not requiring that you have to have expertise in any one particular data visualization software. It's more that they want somebody who has the ability to do data visualization, and then they recognize that there's so many softwares out there. If you know one, you're probably going to be able to easily be trained on another. But yeah, everything that Sharon just said, absolutely agree with that, and happy to talk specifically with people about their resumes.
Yeah.
Along with this question, Oliver dropped something in the chat, which I actually think goes really well with this conversation around skills, saying that they've heard that some positions have Excel competency tests associated with the interview process. And then Oliver's asking, are there any Excel concepts I should brush up with for these assessments? And I would maybe just add as well, in general, do you have any advice for how students might prepare for interviews and being asked perhaps some technical skill-based questions?
So that's why we take you through the ringer in 522, just how to create those flexible spreadsheets. It may seem as though we're asking you way too much, and I understand, but I think that is just giving you the basics of the basics. Please do not think that you're advanced after 522 or you're advanced after 557. That is literally the ground floor of Excel skills. I know folks who have used Khan Academy to sort of skill up and figure out the different ways of using Microsoft Excel. Khan Academy has plenty of free videos, Excel videos. I also understand LinkedIn also has Excel videos that you can use, so brush up on those. For some, especially if you're using Excel as a data management, software, you need to learn how to use VLOOKUPs, you need to know how to create pivot tables. Khan Academy and LinkedIn will have a ton of that. I know I don't cover that in my class because I'm not doing data management, but just keep in mind that there are several videos that you can use. Brush up on those before you go for an interview. Please do not say, oh, make sure that when somebody says, can you do this, do that. You are able to do that. Don't fib on your interview, it's not worth it. The other thing I will say that, that Shannon didn't mention is that I can teach you Excel, I can teach you Microsoft BI, I can teach you Tableau, but I really don't want to teach you presentation when you're already on the job, right? I don't want to teach you how to write when you're already on the job. So just keep in mind, employers are willing to teach you the technical stuff and the insider details. But if you're not, good at doing presentations, if you're not good at doing writing, if you're not good at working in teams, those are just really red flags for a lot of employers. So you want to make sure you polish up on your writing. I always tell folks, take one of the memos you've done in any of your classes that you thought was a really good writing example, take the feedback that you got from faculty and then polish that up. Don't submit your original assignment, polish it up and then use that as a submission in addition to your resume and cover letter. Okay, Jessica?
Yeah, thank you so much. I just had a quick question. You talked a little bit about Seattle and Washington state at like the state level and then kind of federally, but I'm really interested to hear a little bit more about counties, like countywide or maybe smaller towns or cities, what the demand might be for that just outside of that general area. Yeah, could you talk a little bit about that demand? Is it similar to the demand that you're already talking about?
Absolutely. I know I talked about city, implying city of Seattle and state of Washington, but I'm a big fan of smaller cities in terms of your career, especially if you think of yourself as a generalist and not as a specialist, right? So oftentimes when you look at positions, you'll see a lot of SDOT positions, Seattle Department of Transportation or Seattle City Light. But if you go for smaller cities, think of Issaquah, think of Bellingham, think of even Tacoma, I would consider to be a big city. Think of the smaller cities or even smaller counties. A lot of those roles means that you have your hands in everything. You'll be doing budget management, you'll be doing debt management, you'll be doing cash management, you'll be doing facilities management, you'll be doing HR. So you are you're supporting multiple individuals in multiple places. So you get a lot of experience. For folks who may be interested in going into leadership, right? You're thinking about a career as a city manager, not just a city finance manager, but a city manager. Those are the positions those are the jurisdictions I encourage folks to get experience in, because then you get experience in practically everything. Whereas if you, let's say, for example, go into SDOT, then you're only getting experience within that particular agency and within transportation only. So you'd have to move to a different area for you to get additional experience. So there are a lot of positions in smaller governments, and they are more likely to take on folks with less experience because the larger cities are actually hiring more aggressively, right? So the state of Washington and the city of Seattle will outcompete practically anybody else in the market. So just keep in mind, if you're not getting the jobs that you're looking for within, especially the city of Seattle, just think about the smaller cities outside. I know, at least in my first year here as a faculty member, one of our students got a great job in Woodinville, which is not a horrible commute because it was opposite of traffic, but it just gave her that widespread experience. She was essentially the budget analyst for the entire city, and she was responsible for different roles within the city, which gave her a ton of more experience than she would have gotten that if she was working even for the city of Seattle, which would have then been given a particular agency to be responsible for or managing. So if you're interested in smaller governments, I encourage you to apply to those places. There are jobs out there, and they are willing to take on folks straight out of the MPA and train you up. Yeah, thanks, Jessica. Sean?
Yeah, thank you, Professor. This could be too broad of a question, so if it needs to narrow down, go for it. Going from 522 to the electives next year, in the time between, is there anything that you would strongly recommend as somebody, like I did fine in 522, but definitely some room for growth. What would you recommend for skill building practices like during the summer and the in-between time?
Fine, if you can find an internship in budgeting and finance, if this is what you're interested in, that would be the most important thing. I would say, I don't think there is necessarily additional courses that you need to take. I would practice on using some of the software, so Tableau, Microsoft BI. That's where I would focus my attention on, but really being able to just get the internship in budgeting and finance. Folks who get internships in budgeting and finance find it much easier getting positions in budgeting and finance than if you just don't. But you still have the upper hand in the market. And I don't think the market will be much different next year compared to the way it is this year. There's still going to be a lot of folks who are retiring, especially since the start of COVID, the retirements didn't decline significantly. So the panic folks had in 2020 about their retirement plans not having enough money, they are no longer concerned about that, and folks are burnt out. So you're just seeing a lot of open positions and positions staying open for much longer. So I think that's still going to be the case next year. But I think just sticking to finding something in budgeting and finance for now is more than enough. Yeah. Colin? We can't hear you, Colin, if you're saying anything. Do you want to unmute yourself? Yeah.
Hi, I'm so sorry. My computer just froze as I tried to speak. Yeah, I had a quick question, and thank you so much for doing this. But I know a lot of us are interested in like specific policy focuses. So for me, for instance, like environmental policy, and in terms of looking at like careers in finance and budgeting, how like rare is it or uncommon is that you would find a like finance and budgeting job like at, for instance, like the EPA or like a department of Seattle or county that is like focused on a particular policy issue, or would it just be better to just kind of like go more general and then try like move into like a more specified like department or agency or something to that effect later on?
So if you download the PowerPoint and let's say you click on the budget analyst for the Office of Superintendent, for example, that takes you, I can't remember the name of the website, but it's where all the Washington jobs are. There are actually a ton of jobs in Department of Natural Resources for the state of Washington as budget analyst positions. So it's each agency, if you're interested in housing, social policy, yeah, thank you, Shannon, careers.wa.gov. If you're interested in a budgeting position based on a policy area, there are a lot of positions in there. So I think the one I chose as a policy area was schools, for folks who are interested in schools, Department of Transportation, and I believe the other one, did I remove it? And Housing Finance Commission, one for housing, but they are definitely jobs. So I don't think you need to even go to the federal level. There are several jobs at the state level, depending on whether you're interested in water, clean energy. Seattle City Light is also a place that hires a lot of folks also. So if you're interested in electricity. So I wouldn't, if you are interested in a policy area, but you want to work in budgeting and finance in that policy area, I wouldn't say that should stop you and say, oh, I'm going to apply to OMB or GAO and it's sector agnostic. You can definitely find that perfect niche for you.
Awesome, thank you so much.
Then the other thing I will say, and I always have to remind myself, is that your first job is not your last job, right? So just remind yourself, hey, I may not find the perfect position today, or at least upon graduation, but just give yourself that 2 years of experience. And after that 2 years, you'll be able to have really good experience to then move up into a different position as well. And 2 years is perfect, right? Before 2 years, you haven't necessarily accumulated a lot of experience in that job yet. Okay. Neil?
Hi, thank you. If you wanted to kind of influence budget priorities, is that still kind of within like a budgeting job, or does that feel more kind of legislative assistant, or maybe in the executive branch?
Could you give me an example of what you mean by influence policy?
Like allocate more money to XYZ issue, maybe increase priority to redistributing, money kind of things.
So there, I would suggest think about working for a specific legislator whose policies align with your interests, or working in the executive budget office. But keep in mind that you, until you are an elected official, have very limited means of influencing policy compared to a legislator themselves. So you as a budget analyst have to be agnostic of the policies, or at least of the politics. You want to present a good budget, you want to present a good analysis, a fair analysis that provides a balanced approach, you're providing the pros and the cons. But if you want to influence policy, then I would say working in a legislative or an executive budget office would not, let me put that correct, differently. Working for a legislator or working for the executive would be the right place. If you end up in a legislative budget office, so if you work at OPR down in Olympia, you need to be agnostic of the politics because you're representing two different sides of the political spectrum. So you cannot say, I want to influence policy. You're not influencing policy. You're working on behalf of the legislators.
Thank you.
But it seems though you're interested in something that would lead to change. So Another way to think about this is to get your stripes in different budget offices and then run for a leadership position. There you'd be able to say, I have the knowledge in budgeting and finance and also have an area of interest in policy that I want to influence. And we need more folks in elected office who know the basics of budgeting and finance. There are a lot of folks who really don't necessarily understand it as well. Yeah. So Shannon mentions a legislative aid position might be what you're looking for. Yeah. Absolutely. Marie, you're asking, when is a good time to apply for these positions? How long does the hiring process typically take? If there is a standard. Shannon, do you want to take a stab at that before I make my recommendation?
Yeah, sure, happy to. So if you are graduating in June, like let's say this upcoming June, and you are looking for a job that's going to start in June, you can absolutely start looking and applying for jobs now. This may be a little early in that process. Typically, a position gets posted when there is an opening. So if an employer has posted a listing, they're probably hoping to get somebody in as soon as they can. Knowing that, hiring does take a while. There may be a requirement that the job is listed for 2 weeks, especially if it's a public sector job. So that's 2 weeks where they're just collecting applications. Then maybe it takes them a week to review it and they decide these are the people we'd like to do a phone screening with. Scheduling takes time. So it might take another week to schedule and conduct those. And then they want to call back a group for a skill test or a full interview. Again, scheduling takes time. They probably can't have somebody turn around and interview the next day. So they're going to schedule it 1 week out, maybe 2 weeks out, and they have to pull together availability of the interviewers. And then after interviewing everyone, they probably have to gather the committee together to actually make a decision. Then they extend an offer. The person has to take a little bit of time to think about it. And then maybe somebody accepts without taking too long for negotiation. It's also typical that most people have to give at least 2 weeks notice. So even after someone has accepted a position, an employer is not necessarily expecting that that person's going to start the following Monday. So, all that being said, typically a hiring process, if somebody is moving things through really, really quickly, maybe a hiring process that all comes together in a month. More likely it's going to take 2 months, just, knowing all of the steps involved. And then if, just like Sharon was sharing, this is a job seeker market. And for these positions, you all are bringing a set of qualifications that is in very high demand and the supply is low. So if somebody's gone through that entire process, they make you an offer and you say, I'm not available to start work for another month because I have to finish school. There is absolutely room for negotiation there, and people do tend to be willing to work with you. So that being said, like if you were forcing me to give a number of weeks, I would say like on average 6 weeks to hire, but it could be faster. It definitely could be longer, especially depending on the level of bureaucracy that we're talking about.
Yeah, those are perfect. The one thing I will say, and just to reiterate, this is a job seeker market. You do have the advantage. For a lot of folks, they know, especially if it is the hiring entry level positions, they may be advertising early just to get to candidates, the good candidates sooner rather than later. then even when it wasn't a job seeker market, I remember back in 2016, 2017, the jobs weren't that many. And I know for a few of folks who wanted to take June off after graduation, but before starting their new jobs. And a lot of the employers were willing to say, hey, okay, we'll start on July 1. So just keep in mind that there is some flexibility. It really just depends on who your hiring person is and who your supervisor is going to be. For a lot of the jobs, again, I think COVID has changed how we'll be working. So you might be working remotely. So just keep in mind that there's some employers out there who say, okay, we want you to start working, but you can work remotely. Attend meetings, just get onboarded, get a feel for what we need from you. But really, you won't necessarily start working immediately, right? The work will ramp up in 2 or 3 months. So just keep in mind there is what you need to know for you to do your job. And that's not necessarily going to be day one, you know what you need to know to get the work done. But that said, I always say, I always tell folks, apply for jobs. It's good to get practice in this process, right? So Graham, you asked about CVs, right? Sending out your CV and see if anybody's interested in your CV. Practicing the interview process. Sometimes you may get a job offer, sometimes you may not get a job offer. Right? Don't wait until May to start doing this and say, oh, now I'm free. I want to start looking for jobs in May. That to me is kind of late. So you just kind of have to figure a time period between now and then. And I'm risk averse, right? So I'll tend to apply way too early. And if you're not risk averse, then you can probably wait until May. I still think the jobs will be there. Right, there have been a ton of jobs available, particularly in finance. So the jobs will still be there. But I think it's just thinking about also just how you're feeling, getting through capstone, just the level of workload, your other commitments, and whether you have the ability to then start prepping for interviews, applying. Don't recirculate the same cover letter. Make sure you personalize that cover letter. If there's one thing you do as a potential employee is that you don't want to see a cover letter that does not reflect what the position asked or the agency in particular. It just shows us that you're not really interested in the organization. So just think about what your commitments are before applying for these positions. Yeah.
We have, I believe, about 4 minutes. So time for one more question. If anyone has a burning question that they would like to ask before we close off for today. All right, I'm not seeing any hands raised or questions in the chat. So I just want to extend thanks again to Sharon for doing this and lending her expertise. I know that she is a great resource for so many of you. And so glad that we were able to come together and answer a lot of these questions all at once. I know that many of you are in the midst or beginning your internship searches and job searches. So just know Career Development Team is here to be a resource. We're happy to help you with those cover letters, do some of that research, identify some of these websites or places you could be finding things to apply for. And then just what Sharon was saying about your cover letters, we're here to support with that too. And also help you figure out like what's a manageable way that you can actually be tailoring and updating those cover letters for the specific positions you're applying for. But thanks again. And thank you so much to Sharon. I don't know if there's anything else that you might want to share, a last comment or anything like that before we close.
No, just a quick thanks, and you can always get me on email. And if I don't respond to your email, send me another email. Sometimes my email can just get really long and I forget about an email that I got last week, but please don't hesitate to reach out and bug me a couple of times, okay? Thank you all very much for taking the time to connect with us.